Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm ScottGalloway.
And I'm Jessica Tarlov.
How are you, Jess?
I'm really good. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's good to be back. I got a lot of emails yesterday after our episode, after our session, and most of them were not hateful, which is kind of unusual for me.
There was a lot of
anyways,
Scott
it's good to be back.
spitting fire.
Honey, that's a great cup of coffee. That's my sexist throwback to the 50s tonight. Anyways.
I got it.
All right, let's bust into it. The Iran war is back in full swing after Trump formally notified Congress that fighting is resumed. The U.S. will reinstate a naval blockade today, and Trump says the U.S. will charge a 20% fee on cargo to provide safe passage for ships in the Strait of Hormuz. After calling for the arrest and deportations of democratic socialists, here's Trump speaking about why he's restarting the war.
And we're gonna keep the strait, and we'll probably run it. We'll become the guardian of the strait. Maybe we'll call it the guardian angel of the strait. And we can't be expected to do that for nothing, unlike we had for many years. You know, we guarded the strait for 50 years more, and we never got paid for it. They made all the money, and the United States was just, they wouldn't. It's amazing. We guarded it for nothing. And now we're going to guard it, and we're going to get paid for guarding it. A lot of money.
Thoughts, Jess?
I mean, so many thoughts. Mostly Marco Rubio, come and get your boy. This is Marco Rubio a month ago. No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. Those are the rules. That's why we said in the first place that Iran couldn't do what they're doing, even though Iran is obviously going to do this in perpetuity, right? Like, this is the gift that keeps on giving. Unless you completely take over their country, which I know in Donald Trump's most depraved fantasies, that's how he ends up as Ayatollah Trump in all of this, with an incredible amount of power and access to this waterway. It's Iran's, and they can strike whatever deal they want. The region is going to have to, at some point, make side deals with them to make sure that their ships can get in and out, because the entire region, and then by extension the entire world, depends upon it. I just think it's so entertaining. I mean, it would be funny if it didn't have such dire implications for the global economy, but watching him flail like this, right? Like, he tried all-out war. We apparently obliterated everyone, right? Their navy was at the bottom of the sea, etc. But that didn't work, I guess. He tried diplomacy. That was a huge bomb. He's now blaming Obama for it. He was talking about a couple days ago how Obama is actually secretly a terrorist again. So we're back to old school conspiracy theories or slander. And I saw the inflation report this morning, and I thought, like, oh, this is going to be such a shit day on the 5, right? They're going to be gloating. It's the single biggest drop in inflation since April 2020, 4.2% in May, down to 3.5%. And I'm like, oh, and this coincides with him ramping up the war again. And the biggest drop was obviously from the gas prices and the electricity costs, all tied to the fact that we were supposed to be getting some sort of solution, diplomatic solution to the war. So I'm sure the prices are going to spike back up again. I'm not rooting against America. I don't like us paying more. I am just trying to survive the 5 to 6 p.m. hour. So I think that I'll be okay. This seems dumb. What do you think?
So when I graduated from business school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to go back into investment banking. And I took a strategy course, and I thought, oh, I'm going to start a strategy firm because I have 2 years of experience in fixed income, and I'm 26, and it makes sense that I should start a strategy firm. And so the first thing I started doing was reading all these strategy books and basically adopting their methodologies and doing these offsites. And I called the CEOs of companies who are alumni of the hospital and said, I've started a strategy firm. Can you let me come in and pitch you on how I can help you make better decisions? And I got Williams-Sonoma, Levi's, Dryers as clients almost right out of the gate because...
That's amazing.
Well, it wasn't because I was that talented. It was because the hospital has a very strong affinity among alumni, because it's actually, fun fact, the smallest class size among the top 20 business schools. And Howard Lester, a really smart, wonderful man, was the CEO of Williams-Sonoma. Rick Kronk, another smart, wonderful man, CEO of Dryers, and the Haas family, after which the school is named, were the CEOs of those 3 firms. And one of the things I used to do is I would take management off-site, and we would do scenario planning. And that was big back then. And scenario planning is basically saying, okay, rather than trying to think about what the best decision is, what decisions could you take that would have the best outcomes across a number of scenarios, recognizing that a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the forest in the Amazon can create a hurricane or not. And it was really, I thought it was really powerful. And I feel as if the Trump administration has no one doing anything resembling scenario planning. Because one of the keys to our advantage and one of the keys to global prosperity, where we have literally brought, I think, 2 billion people out of poverty since World War II, is capitalism, democracy, and a key component of that prosperity has been global trade. And that is, we figured out that we're not very good at growing bananas, but, whatever it is, Honduras or Brazil or El Salvador, and that we don't have that much great high-quality timberwood, but Canada does, but we make great iPhones. And so we all decide to trade with each other, leveraging this great economic concept called comparative advantage. And we all end up with better products for less money and prosperity, and all of us, have a better shot at getting to go to Disneyland or send our kids to school or college or whatever. Anyway, key to that prosperity or key to that comparative advantage has been we have to get these products from point A to point B. And one of the better uses of our Navy, which is exceptionally expensive, is enforcing something called freedom of navigation, which is yet another norm since World War II that we have taken for granted. And that is, generally speaking, everyone is pretty much allowed to go everywhere as long as they're not planning to fire missiles at you, and you aren't allowed to extract a toll. And so even if we were to be successful, to blockade Iranian ports such that they can't ship out oil to put pressure on them and to get leverage such that they come to the table as opposed to the delay and obfuscation and just laughing at the ass clown that is our president right now and saying, all we have to do is wait this guy out and maybe occasionally fire some projectiles into their allies in the region and they will fold and leave because they have a glass jaw. They did not get public support. They did not coordinate with their allies. They did not figure out accurate defensive systems for their allies in the region. They did absolutely no planning or scenario planning around what would happen if we took control of the aorta of the global economy, the Strait of Hormuz. They did absolutely none of this. But if, in fact, he decides to normalize the notion that a superpower or anyone can get in the way of freedom of navigation other than a rogue nation like Iran, then what is to stop Egypt from saying, you know what? We could use the money. No one can pass through the Suez Canal. Panama, the Panama Canal. I mean, Yemen is probably thinking, well, let's make it more difficult. Let's charge a toll to navigate the Bab el-Mandeb. And all of a sudden, the entire world, what happens is insurance rates, what you have with this type of thing is you don't see it in the numbers right away. Where you see it is insurance becomes the tax before any government recognizes the tax. War risk premiums can go up 7 or 8-fold overnight. And what's happened is that all of these threats have resulted in basically the Strait of Hormuz is essentially shut down. It's collapsed from roughly 130 plus vessels a day pre-war to just 10 Monday. And even if he's successful bringing them to the table, which he should do through economic blockade, and also probably, quite frankly, if they keep firing, I agree with the administration, they should probably fire back. But what happens if we're actually able to start charging a toll in Hormuz? Then we've said to the entire world, hey, have at it. Do you have control over a strait? And then we immediately regress to a pre-World War II, less global trade, more expensive, less prosperous world. These people literally have their head up their ass with respect to any sort of strategy or scenario planning around what is good for the West, what is good for us. And if you think about global trade, there are points of asymmetry. We shouldn't allow China to steal our IP, sell us goods under market, consolidate the industry. I get it. And I want to give the Trump administration credit. I think they got China correct. But 98% of global trade that we engage in is asymmetrically beneficial towards us. Because at the end of the day, the majority of the products we ship out are high-value, IP-driven Nike and Apple products with enormous margins. So when we convince Latin America or Europe or Asia to trade $1 of products for $1 of ours, we sell higher margin, higher multiple products in the marketplace. So all trade is not created equal. When we sell $1 of iPhones into Canada, if 40% margin, 40 cents, 33 PE, we get shareholder value of $12. When they sell $1 of timberwood into us or crude oil, that's 10 or 20 points of margin times a PE of 10. They get dramatically less shareholder value. So these folks don't ever actually think through. No one clearly has the ear of the president to sit down and say, okay, well, if you do A, these are the potential outcomes. And this is what it means for America and its allies. There's never a checking of an 80-year-old's instincts, which are really poor instincts. Any thoughts?
I just wanted to add to it that this is such an abdication of our world leadership role, which has been like a slow-moving car accident, right? Since from the Trump one term into the second Trump term. But all of these countries that people in this administration would regularly malign, right, would say they're like in the Stone Age, right? These are people who don't understand modern society, who treat their women like dirt, who throw gay people or trans people off roofs, etc. The people running those countries, generally speaking, understand free economics, actually, and free waterways, and that even if you want to run your country in a way that we certainly wouldn't agree with, it doesn't fit with the Western democratic mold that we love to uphold, but that there are certain things that you need to do to survive. And I was watching this clip from 4 months ago of Pete Hegseth getting asked seemingly for the first time about the Strait of Hormuz. And he was like, we're aware of it. We're monitoring the situation, but it's nothing to worry about. And I don't know if he was just like holding his cards close to his vest or close to his tat. But that really stuck with me, that the public facing response to the obvious thing that Iran was going to do when we were pelting them with missiles, and Israel was doing the same, and their leadership had been taken out, and they were essentially in the defensive crouch, was to take control of the most important thing that they have, which is this enormously important waterway, which, has implications, like I said, for the region, but like 40% of our fertilizer too. So this wasn't a problem that we could ever just poo-poo away and say, well, it's going to be a problem for them. Is it worse for the Europeans? Yeah, of course it's worse for the Europeans, but it's pretty effing bad for us too. I'm curious what you make of the fact that, Trump has notified Congress of the resumption of the war. And Leader Jeffries was on with Aaron Parnas, with our pal and my Raging Perspective partner. And he said that maybe Trump wants to do another War Powers Act, and maybe he won't veto it this time. Like, do you think that there's a chance that he's looking for an off-ramp? Because I can only think that the reason that he would consult Congress, which he is loath to do, even when it is mandated by the Constitution, is that he wants somebody else to be the bad guy, right? To be the fall guy. And he could at least say, I would have kept going. I would have destroyed them. But these lunatics in Congress, right? My hands were tied.
Yeah, now that shit's gotten real, he wants other people to share the blame. I mean, this puts, I think politically it's probably a good move because he's stuck himself in a corner now. And now he said, now all of a sudden he's decided, it reminds me when the airline CEOs were using all of their free cash flow pre-COVID to buy back stocks, which would juice their stock price such that they could pay themselves $150 million combined over the 3 years before COVID. And then when shit got real in COVID, they decided we were all socialists and we were in this together. He's now decided, we're in this together. And he wants decisions to be collectively approved by Congress. And also, and we're going to get shit for this, I do believe now, given where we are right now, unless you just want to forfeit the Strait of Hormuz to Iran, you're probably going to have to credibly threaten and affect military action against Iran unless they come to the table. We're sort of like just picking up, going, we fucked up. We have a glass jaw. We've lost I don't know if it's 13 or 17 service people, and our allies are under fire, we're out. Then they control the Strait of Hormuz. And if you think that's unacceptable, as I do, you probably are going to need a credible threat of continued military action or embargo, which will require a naval blockade. So it's like, okay, he broke it. Now he wants Congress to take responsibility alongside of him with fixing it. So I think this is probably, I don't want to call this a savvy move. The savviest move would have been to enlist or at least brief Congress and enlist his allies, Western allies, and be more measured about it and put a time limit on it, strike, defenestrate the missiles, the Navy, and get the fuck out. And also, quite frankly, not do anything until you understand or have sign off from Central Command or, the head of the Sixth Fleet in the region or whoever it is that we can secure the Strait of Hormuz. So there's sort of recklessness and then, Mom, I burned down the house, but what should we do? Like we're in this together now. What should we do? I want this to be a collective family decision around what we should do. And he doesn't seem to, well, let me back up. At the end of the day, I think it's probably a smart move for him because it also puts the Democrats, I think, in a difficult spot because this is where we are. And just acquiescing to the IRGC right now feels pretty low. I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. That it was easy for the Democrats to say, just get out. This is a bad idea. Just get out as quickly as possible. That's sort of Senator Murphy's viewpoint. I'm not sure that's the right decision right now. And this is a definition of a quagmire where people can credibly say, all right, we're just going to go further and further. We're going to spiral down into a regional war. And every day we're there increases risks. But we've handed them something really powerful. And I think now we have to figure out if it's worth just acquiescing it to them or if we're going to credibly threaten it. And the more credible threat would be if some Democrats, let me ask you this. If he takes it to Congress, do you think it goes purely down party lines?
No, and it didn't last time either. There were Republican crossover. So no, I don't think so. I think that there will be a lot more crossover than even before, even if it's just folks looking ahead to the midterms, like referencing back that inflation report that I brought up at the beginning of the show, right? Saying like, we just can't go into an election with $4.50 gas. And that is where we are going to head. And all of the Iranian statements and PR that's coming out is basically taunting that way, right? Like we know what we can do to you. And if oil goes back up on a per barrel basis, they were floating around $200. It's just unsustainable for us on a domestic level. So I think that he might really be looking for an opportunity to duck and cover and look a little less dictatory in the interim. But what's concerning to me is that up until this point, or up until a few weeks ago, you could realistically think that there could be a diplomatic solution to this that might get us somewhere near the JCPOA. Maybe it wouldn't be completely there because Iran understands what a flex it is or what kind of control it has by leveraging the Strait of Hormuz. But we were at the table, proverbially speaking. And now you're seeing folks who are very enthusiastic about this war, strong supporters of the president, calling out the diplomacy team, saying, like, we've got real estate developers over there trying to negotiate this. And even saying it didn't work out for us with Gaza either. We don't talk about it anymore. But in terms of an enduring solution, we got nada out of the Witkoff and Kushner duo, besides the return of the hostages, which obviously matters. But in terms of a plan going forward, we're nowhere when it comes to Gaza. So I think that is an important shift and would be reflected in a war powers vote if they brought it again. And I'm sure that Jeffries is weighing that heavily, but I just don't know how it ends is the problem here. And I assume they're not asking any of the actual folks at the State Department who know how to do this. They're certainly not calling John Kerry, even on a secret signal chat, and saying, like, could you tell us, like, how to do this, right? So it feels very bleak at this point.
Moving Occam's razor, what is the IRGC's incentive to negotiate? They know that every day we get close to the midterms, there's more of a sense of urgency to pull up and leave, pull up stakes and leave. They realize, they have several advantages. They've discovered this incredible choke point. It appears the IRGC has more of a firm grip on the populace than we had initially anticipated, and they are willing to subject their populace to massive damage and suffering, which we are not willing to endure by a long shot. So it feels like all the cards are there. So the question is, how do we get leverage against them? And I asked that question of Secretary Clinton on stage at the Property Markets Tour. And she said, coordinating, there are some allies that want to see an end to this, that have some leverage with Iran. But I can't understand why at this point they would negotiate. And I feel like every negotiation, we said this a few weeks ago, I said this memo of understanding was not worth the paper it was written on. You could tell by the wording that it wasn't going to happen. That's ridiculous that we thought that that was going to have any veracity. All incentives point to one thing. They have no incentive other than to run out the clock. They're just slow bug. They will agree to just enough. They will give just enough signals to try and limit the military action and damage against their oil infrastructure while letting the clock tick out. Because at some point, and they know this, he has to leave. He has no support for ongoing military action or even presence there. So just wave your hands. No, I like you. No, I'm still interested in you. Oh, keep paying my rent. I don't know what analogy, where I'm going with this, but at some point, you're out of time. All the advantage is on their side, and we have ceded advantage, and we have given them new points of leverage.
Little breaking news while we were recording, the president is now saying that the previously announced 20% fee on the Strait of Hormuz will be replaced with trade and investment deals between Gulf states and the U.S. So more fake investment. What does he say? It's up to $17 trillion. I think that he's gotten committed since he came back into office.
Should we move on?
Yeah, let's do it. Support for the show comes from Decagon. Customers feel happiest when it feels like you're talking directly to them. But when more and more requests start to come in, a lot of companies turn to AI and lose that personal touch. Decagon helps your support feel personal no matter how many requests you get. Decagon helps companies create personalized, concierge-style customer experiences with AI agents across chat, email, voice, and SMS. They're available 24/7, feel natural to talk to, and can resolve customer requests on their own, so businesses can keep up with requests without losing their personal touch. Decagon plugs directly into your existing systems, so agents can get live quickly. And because workflows can be updated using natural language, teams can make changes themselves without long engineering cycles. That means less time spent managing workflows, more time focused on customers, and ROI in weeks. Ready to transform your customer support? Go to decagon.ai/moderates to get a personalized demo and see what Decagon can do for your team. Check Decagon out at decagon.ai/moderates. That's decagon.ai/moderates.
Protesters surrounded Maine Senator SusanCollins' office yesterday following the fatal eye shooting of a 26-year-old Colombian man in Biddeford. The man shot was not the target of agents' warrant, and there are reports that his 3-year-old daughter was in the car. The Maine Immigrants' Rights Coalition says that Juan Sebastian Guerrero was legally authorized to work in the U.S. Jess, just similar to the agents in Houston, the agents in Maine were reportedly not wearing body cams. Any thoughts on this?
I have so many thoughts, all of them angry and sad. I feel like we've been transported back several months to Minnesota, where, thousands took to the streets to try to reclaim their city and, frankly, our country. And these two cases in Houston and in Maine, I think, really showcase how the administration, the people are supposed to be the keepers of our Constitution and the ethos, the morals of America, so wildly misunderstand it. And frankly, how evil and depraved they are. I mean, that there was a 3-year-old in this car. It's 7:15 in the morning. She is wearing bluey pajamas and sees her father get a bullet in the head and then get yanked out of the car. To be put down on the ground. Again, another instance like with Renee Good, no attempt at life-saving medical attention given to this man. It's just completely heartbreaking, and there's no reason for it. There are certain jobs where you cannot be sloppy. And ICE and CBP is actually one of them. You think about a surgeon doing something incredibly complicated and, what kind of shockwaves get sent through a system if something goes wrong in, a surgery. People do weird things like leave a towel inside of you. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, they got the wrong guy and he's dead. I mean, there have been 10 ICE shootings since Trump came back into office, 4 of them fatal, 2 Americans, Alex Purdy and Renee Good, and then these 2 gentlemen. The Houston man, we didn't get to talk about it last week when you were off, been here 30 years, works at a car wash, kids, American citizens, exactly what we think of when we think of good immigrants. Right? The ones who may have come here illegally, but came for the American dream and are living up to it. No infractions, no brush-ups with the law, nothing. And the callousness of CBP and ICE, and at first, Mark Wayne Mullen, the DHS secretary, about this, at first didn't admit that the guy wasn't actually the original target, and only because Angus King. So Maine right now, I understand there are people who, SusanCollins, she's the head of appropriations. She's very powerful in that sense. But when you look at what happened, Maine right now has 1 senator, and that senator is Angus King. He's the one who called up Secretary Mullen, got him on the phone and pushed for answers. He's the one that got Mullen actually to make the retraction about who was the target of this and that they had gotten the wrong guy and brutally murdered him. SusanCollins, very concerned, as usual. But SusanCollins also a deciding vote for this extra $70 billion in ICE funding that came with no stipulations that they had to wear body cams. Think back to the DHS funding fight, right, with the government shutdown. And there were very few things that Democrats and Republicans agreed upon, and one of them was body cams. And then the Republicans go behind the Democrats' backs, essentially, and they ram through partisan reconciliation that made ICE promise nothing. They can operate with reckless abandon. It's like Stephen Miller is out there on the streets himself. And SusanCollins voted for that. And I know that when people go to vote in Maine in November, there are a bunch of things that you have to think about. First and foremost, your economic situation. But guess what? She voted to make your economic situation worse, and she voted to allow CBP and ICE to be this utterly reckless and depraved. I mean, they are ramping up ICE missions all over the country. They took a few months off after Minnesota, and I was very struck by what AOC said. She was interviewed yesterday about this, and she said, I told you that when ICE funding started up again, we would start to see more civilian deaths at the hands of ICE, and that's exactly what's happened. When you open the trenches with all of this money that Republicans have now funneled to ICE without any oversight, you're going to see abuses of power. We didn't see this happening to the same degree of regularity when we froze ICE funding. And she's 100% right.
Look, we're a visual species. And when you see video footage of Renee Good, a mother of 2, getting shot in the face, when you see an ICU nurse pelted with 10 bullets, and then all the quote-unquote trained government officials run like fucking 9th graders where a firework went off, clearly lacking all real training, who, by the way, are wearing masks because I believe their kids and their grandkids are going to be so ashamed of them in future employers, who, by the way, are getting much bigger bonuses and compensation than almost any public school teacher in America, which gives you a sense for our priorities, where we're, by the way, spending more on ICE than we spend on children in our country. It's important that people like you with a footprint and who are on national TV bring voice to Mr. Sebastian Guerrero, because the reality is without that video, it doesn't hit our species as hard. So I commend you. I wasn't even thinking about it that much, and I think it's important, and you're making me think more about it. That just because there isn't video footage doesn't make it any less heinous or depraved or, any less of an assault on the Constitution and our American values. I'm of the mind that, okay, so what do we do? And again, there's going to be a lot of indignance. There's going to be a lack of ideas. I do think there needs to be some sort of federal legislation proposed right away that says, look, our men and women in blue and even our ICE agents have a difficult job. These are difficult situations. But for their protection and our protection, it's federal law. Unless you're in a covert operation where you're undercover, you have to have a working body cam. Otherwise, you can't. Every morning they get lined up, and the supervisor's job is, okay, do you have your uniform on? Are you capable? Are you not drunk? And also, is your body cam working? And they need to have redundant systems in case the first lens isn't working. Because my feeling is if you get in front of a judge or any supervisory committee and your cam wasn't working, the presumption of guilt is on you. There's no reason not to have a cam working at all times to see what exactly happened. And by the way, it might be for their protection. We may not be getting the right story here. We may not know actually what went on. The other second order effect here, I actually am more hopeful about this seat than I was a few weeks ago, because all of this, shit surrounding Plattner, we were all kind of thinking, okay, is there another shoe going to drop? If they get someone with a shit ton of chest hair who wants universal coverage and hasn't raped anybody, that person is going to win. And what the Democrats should be focused on right now is forcing, whether it's because of this incident, forcing Senator Collins out of her house. Are you Mitch McConnell? Then why aren't you speaking? Force her to do interviews. Because here's the thing. She, like the majority of our politicians, is too fucking old. And America is coming to the realization that we shouldn't have octogenarians on the wheel of the global economy and the most important decisions we make. And they're going to look at SusanCollins and go, oh, fuck. You mean by the time she leaves office, if she's reelected, she's going to be older than Mitch McConnell is now? And by the way, she looks much worse than Senator McConnell did at her age. So I'm like, wheel her out and force her to show that she has the vigor and health and cognitive abilities to serve the state of Maine for the next 6 years. So I'm like, get around her house, get her on Fox, because just as any minute she is on TV is going to have people go, maybe it's time for Nana to spend more time with her kids. So I think in a weird way, I think all of this, the weekend at Bernie's with Mitch McConnell, with Senator McConnell, the sudden death of Senator Graham, I think that has probably got us a senator in Maine. Your thoughts?
I hope that you're right. I really do. And I think that the debates, when they happen, will be illuminating for people, because I do think that SusanCollins has aged a lot in these 6 years, as happens in your 70s. On the body cam front, you're absolutely right. There are officers that are exonerated from very precarious circumstances, sometimes even, having killed someone because of the body cam footage, that you can actually prove that their lives were in danger and you can see more of what was going on in the room, etc. So it is good for you, and it is good for the people on the other sides of these altercations for you to wear body cams. It also should just be a law. Period. End of story. And we do know that there is this pattern of ICE and CBP claiming that their lives were in danger and that people were trying to ram their cars into them. So the video does not show this in this case, just as it didn't in Minnesota, it didn't in Chicago, et cetera. But I wanted to add, and I didn't know about this, but there was a report by something called the Police Executive Research Forum 13 years ago, and it was commissioned by CBP. And it found that CBP personnel frequently put themselves in the path of a vehicle to justify deadly force. And you saw that with the officer with Renee Good as well, right? How he kind of like leans into it. And remember the days where they were trying to tell us that he was in the hospital and that he had internal bleeding and broken ribs, and CBS was the only one that ran with that report. And then nothing came of it. But if you actually have a research report that shows that this is a tactic, it behooves Markwayne Mullin to deal with this. Unless you actually want to command a rogue agency, unless that is your dream job or dream scenario for this, because I'm no way. I think the broad, I think that most people who serve in ICE or CBP are good people. I think that's true of law enforcement, generally speaking. When they were all over our airports, could not have been nicer, more helpful. I'm traveling with 2 kids, helping me unpack bags, take my electronics out, all of it. And just with this look on their faces, like, why am I sitting in an airport, right? Like, I took this job so that I could help enforce our immigration policies and be at the border, et cetera. But when you let things like this happen and you just blindly defend practices that obviously end up in unnecessary deaths/murders, you look like you're fine with it, that you're rubber stamping it. And it just bums me out also that it feels like Tom Homman was fine with just waiting for the opportunity when this could ramp back up. 5% of Maine's population are immigrants. And guess what they're doing there? Taking care of the aging population. Maine is the oldest state in the country. It's ahead of Florida. They need people like this who will be your home health aide, who will help with childcare and nursing and work in your hospitals, the ones that you haven't closed down because you're defunding those too. It's sickening, and it's so un-American what's going on here. And I think if people don't stand up about this, that they are going to be full of regret for as long as they live, that they didn't take this moment to say enough is enough. You want your tax cuts, I can deal with that. But we can't have lawless ICE officers in the streets shooting guys with a 3-year-old in the passenger seat who weren't even on your radar.
So I get served. I love those TikToks and those reels of cops when they pull over people. It's kind of like, let's find, in general, there's the few videos where some asshole cop drunk on power pulls over a guy that ends up being a judge and treats this person poorly. There's just like all this kind of these racial undertones of this person stereotyping this person and assuming the worst about them, treating them poorly with a lack of respect. And then they get out and you find out the guy's actually a judge or the woman is the assistant DA. And all of a sudden the cop starts freaking out about the fact he's about to lose his boat and his pension, rightfully. But 97% of the time when I see these things, I'm like, I'm on the cop side. These guys, these men and women handle some of the most complex, difficult situations. That is a tough job that commands and demands real skills on a number of physical, interpersonal, and intellectual dimensions. And when I see this footage, the vast majority of footage from body cams, I'm really impressed. And I'm empathetic to what they're dealing with. And I usually fall on the side of the cop. You get pulled over by a cop and they ask you for a driver's license and you refuse and you just are acting like an asshole. I'm kind of like, I'm a boomer. I'm like, break the fucking window. I watched the video to the end to see when they break the window. That's the money shot for me. But just as where there was smoke, we were worried there was going to be fire, and there was around Senate candidate Plattner. Let's talk about Tom Homman. There's a credible accusation that Tom Homman took $50,000 in cash in a brown paper bag.
Yeah, Kava.
And by the way, there's never been credible pushback. These were two undercover FBI agents. But we're just going to ignore that. The guy is a fucking he has a very credible allegation. A former girlfriend is a credible accuser. So are FBI agents. This guy, and I just love how we've just forgotten about that.
Can I add to it, though?
Go ahead.
Well, A, yes to that. And then B, look at the contracts with these private prison companies like Core Civic. And you will see the money train, the circular money trail that goes between people that run these private prisons and then come in and out of CBP, and who they're close with, and who suddenly is living in a house that they cannot afford on their government salary. And no surprise that the conditions in these private prisons are demonstrably worse than ones operated by the government. And they're all cogs in this sick wheel.
Another inability to understand nuance and strategy. I'm a private markets guy. I think you should always opt for having the private market do something or handle something. The competition and personal incentives, I think we should always opt in a capitalist society to think, could the private sector do a better job of this? I'm a private markets guy. I think it's insane that the government thinks that they can have input into U.S. Steel, or that they should choose which chip company they're going to invest in, as they did in Intel, and potentially think about what is effectively a bailout, cosplaying investment with these discussions around taking a stake in OpenAI. That is socialism. At the same time, there are certain things that we should not put into the private sector because you end up monetizing them to the extent that it begins to damage our nation. We should not be monetizing healthcare. Our decision to take something everybody needs and where that requires scale and where shareholder value probably comes down third or fourth, that means healthcare should not be monetized. And when we monetize it and we let CEOs make $20, $30, $50 million a year by effectively giving them incentives to deny coverage to people, or to overcharge, or to go vertical where you control the prescription company, the drug distributor, and the insurance company, it doesn't make sense to monetize healthcare. The difference between our healthcare system here and the rest of the G7 countries is that we pay $13,500, they pay $6,500 to $8,000 per capita on interesting. Actually, we're at $14,500 now. And we live less long and are more obese and anxious. Why? Because we've decided there's a shit ton of money in that incremental $8,000 for shareholders. And those shareholders turn around and give money to politicians who have concerns and thoughtfully talk about why we shouldn't have universal health care or lower Medicaid and Medicare eligibility by a couple of years each year. I mean, we have monetized healthcare. Bad idea. We have now monetized prisons. Bad idea. And now we've decided to monetize the White House. I know. I'm going to take the power of the White House and make my kids rich. I'm going to become wealthier by neutering the IRS or getting rid of the crypto enforcement unit at the SEC as I launch my own coin. There needs to be a nationalization of several industries. And people will call me a communist. Fine. The Navy should not be run by a private organization. It probably makes sense for private companies to build the ships, but it should not be run by a private company. It is too important that we think about other things before profits. Our healthcare system, it needs to be a combination of private and public. The insurance industry, agreed, should probably have a private competitive element to it, but similar to other European nations where they say above a certain level of EBITDA, you have to refund the policyholders, as they do with fire and flood in certain areas where there's just one provider. But we have decided in this country, because of our obsession with the dollar, privatization and regulatory capture, and increasingly corrupt administrations where norms seem to be thrown out the window, we've decided to monetize our national treasures. We've decided to bankrupt the U.S. and transfer that money to shareholders. And this is another example. Private prisons? No. Prisons should be government run. Should there be elements of it? Who builds them? Who maybe food contracts? Fine. The personnel that work there. But when you create an incentive system to incarcerate more people, that's contrary to what's good for America. When you make a decision that the less you spend on inmates, which likely results in greater crime, obviously terrible treatment of people, then you've lost the script. We have privatized the wrong things, and we've socialized the wrong things on the business end. Should we leave it there?
Let's leave it there.